Oh! It blinded me, I couldn't see the floor.
The way opens. Come, walk the path to power. There is no other path.
Hey, what's up, Shadow Priest buddies? So, damn. Alright, so I'm gonna need some new recommendations on what I call you guys now. Are you gonna be Shadow Priest buddies? Or maybe Black Mage buddies? But maybe we're just Dark Caster buddies. Or some shit. I don't know, give me some recommendations in the comments. I want to hear your ideas, but this video today, we're going to talk about Black Mage. I have found myself looking for an alternative to Voidform. Unfortunately, the new rework doesn't help me in particular. Some people it works for, which is great for them, but the nature of the rework, they didn't meet us in the middle of the road, and therefore the extreme division of the community is going to persist, unfortunately. So for people that were really on the Voidform side, we're left with being unhappy, or if you're lucky and you like the rework, I envy you, or you're stuck looking for an alternative. So in my case, I had to look for an alternative. I won't bore you with the details, but I couldn't play it. I just couldn't do it. So I was looking for, you know, what else in WoW, or outside of WoW, is gonna fill that, you know, void for me. And I searched high and low, spent a lot of time on this. You don't invest in an MMO and change MMOs easily. I didn't want to leave WoW. I really didn't. But I was left with this road, if you will, and found myself in Final Fantasy and playing Black Mage. Now, this video today is to talk about how fucking stoked I am to talk about it, and explain, like, why. Like, why is Black Mage filling the void for me? And this is not going to be a rotational video or how to master Black Mage. It's going to talk about what it filled the void that I lost. You know, what was deleted from WoW that's no longer available to fill the void, and I'm gonna go over that today. So if you guys want to watch, just for your entertainment, feel free. I'm not here to convince you to go to Final Fantasy. That is very much an individual decision, and I'm not here to do that. I just want to show you my passion. This is what this channel is always about. I'm super passionate about something, and I'm like, oh my god, I really want to show you guys this. I make the videos for myself. I think they're cool. I had a lot of fun with this one. I love seeing the parallels between the two specs, and that's what I'm going to get into today. So, what is the overview of Black Mage? If you have no idea what the fuck a Black Mage is, it's Final Fantasy, obviously, as opposed to WoW, unfortunately. It's a dark-themed caster, so it's got that going for it. Not quite as dark as a Shadow Priest, but it's definitely got a dark, you know, underpin to it. Not necessarily what makes me play his spec, but definitely a bonus there. It's a godlike caster, meaning it's the quote-unquote number one DPS spec in Final Fantasy. So it's a god. If you can master the spec, it's gonna pay off for you. You'd literally be walking on a pedestal and everyone will say, oh my god, dude, that... Whatever. Alright, I'm rambling. Alright, next. Major spells is Ice, Fire, and Void. So we're dealing with Frost spells, we're dealing with Fire spells, but also Void spells. So that's the theme. There is a dot, damage over time, only one of them. It's a lightning spell. So it's a little bit of everything. A little bit of everything. So Black Mage is a triple resource system. It has 3 parts to it, and that's why this video is going to be very in-depth, like not in-depth from a rotational standpoint, but in-depth from, you know, the resource perspective and like what it feels like and what it's involved. Because the resource system is complex, it has, I think, a little bit for someone, no matter who you are, if you're willing to deal with some of its nuances, right? So we'll get into that later, but so triple resource system, it has a burn and conserve phase, just like Arcane Mage. So if you liked Arcane in any way, shape, or form, it has that burn, conserve, and it actually uses mana. I'm not going to focus on the mana because it's pretty like natural to understand, but that's what I talk about, burn and conserve. It has high pressure casting, similar to Voidform. So this is one of the big things for me. If you can AFK, or like AFK whenever your cooldowns aren't active, to me that's really boring. I like consistent globals that every global matters, so that's the other part of this resource system, is high pressure to cast. You have to cast. Every global matters, you can't just like AFK. So it has that in its resource system. Also, it does have a builder spender element in it. I put that third in the list because it's a minor element. It's sort of like the sprinkles on a sundae. It's very minor, but it does exist. So if you liked builder spenders, you're probably not watching this video because you're just going to play the new Shadow Priest, but it has all 3 things. And I think that's important to understand before we get into this, is the Black Mage resource system seems complex, but it's because it's got these 3 parts going on. Alright, let's talk about my favorite part. The shared attributes. What are all the things that Voidform Shadow Priest had that Black Mage also has? And the list is actually quite long, and this is what makes me like super stoked about the spec. And to be honest, thankful that it exists somewhere in the world, because WoW isn't catering to it in any way, shape, or form. So let's go through it. So shared attributes, the dark theme, obviously I mentioned before, is shared. There is some void spells in the spec. The resource system, as I mentioned before, you have to fight to keep it rolling, which, you know, every GCD is going to matter, which is the next 2 points down, but one of the things Black Mage has is it's punishing. Because you have this resource system that you're fighting to keep it rolling, if you screw it up in some way, for any reason, you scuff it, and then it's hard to recover. Now, it sounds like a negative, but for me, it just makes it rewarding when you get it all to work out. And unlike, you know, I can throw this out there that, you know, Legion Shadow Priest was probably the pinnacle of punishment, and BFA Shadow Priest was definitely a lot easier in this regard. I think Black Mage has a decent balance to it. It's not, in my opinion, a problem. I think it's, again, whatever. This is something that I liked, and Black Mage has it. So resource system, keep it rolling. Punishment, if you screw it up, has that roll feeling. And every GCD matters, which I talked about before. Those are really big for me, and what kind of made me leave WoW, because they don't offer it anywhere. Rewards for consistent play. We talked about that. That's a GCD. Alright, compelling. Compelling is different. It's different for everybody, and it's subjective. Right around level 60, you get Fire 4. That's when you get the beat of the spec fully flushed out with all your spells. It hooks you. It hooks you in that moment, right around Fire 4. So if you play Final Fantasy and you try it out, or if you played it in the past and you didn't get to level 60, then you didn't experience the spec properly. Sort of like experiencing a Shadow Priest without crit or haste gear. Like, you can't judge it until you get to a certain point. In Final Fantasy, it's not gear, it's just getting to level 60. The max in the game is level 80, in contrast. It just feels good, alright? So, yes, subjective. Moving on. Got a lot to cover in this video. Satisfying. So, the performance, like, and I mentioned this before, when you pull it off and it all comes together and you just play flawlessly or near flawlessly, you feel good. And you feel good because what you just did, no schmuck can do, right? Like, you didn't like just roll your face on your keyboard and call it a day. So it feels good, right? So it's got that satisfaction underpin to it. And a subjective, of course. Spec feedback. And a lot of these things are all intertwined, right? But they are still separate. Spec feedback is you can feel the performance, right? And know that you did well, but without a meter. You could actually, and listen, I'm running meters in Final Fantasy, everybody does. Just don't tell people. So the thing about spec feedback is, even if you're ignoring your meter for the time being, when you scuff it, you know you're just fucked it up. So you also, in contrast to that, if you pull everything off or you recover it relatively quickly, faster than you should have been able to, it has that feedback in-game without a meter that you did well or you did poorly. And the thing about that is, it's not to feel bad. Of course you're going to feel bad when you scuff it, but it's to push you to do better the next time. So the next time when you do, it's like 10 times more rewarding. This is something lost in the rework and any other spec in WoW, but Black Mage has it, and that was important to me. Movement. So movement, a lot of casters have this element, but for sure, maybe even more so with Voidform Shadow Priest and even more so with Black Mage, you have to plan out your movement for content, whether it be a dungeon, dungeons less so, but more so in raids. You know, maybe you need to know, hey, at like 1 minute in, there's this mechanic, and I need to make sure I'm slowly shimmying over to this location. And if you go above and beyond and map out your movement, you therefore, move in advance. You get rewarded for that. So that's another element that they share. The dance. So with Voidform, the dance is, every third global you could Void Bolt and move inside of that GCD. In Final Fantasy, it's slide casting, which means towards the end of your cast, you can move and it won't interrupt. Sort of like refreshing a dot in a pandemic window. There's this grace that they give you. So in Final Fantasy, it's slide casting. There's other stuff for instant cast, but I'm not going to focus on that in this video. But for a Void Bolt replacement, it's slide casting. So they share that element. Let's talk about CDs. So in WoW, almost every spec at this point is, here's a 3-minute or a 5-minute cooldown or some kind of huge cooldown. And that's all the damage that matters. Very few specs are different than that, and the rework Shadow still doesn't have CD dependency. I have concerns about what's going to happen in Shadowlands, but we're not going to talk about that. But at least Black Mage continues that same thing. There's no long cooldown dependency. All the cooldowns Black Mage has are short cooldowns, similar to Arcane, but Arcane had a lot of burst associated with it, and Black Mage doesn't. It's a little bit more of a flat line in terms of damage. So the CDs are very minor contribution to its total output. Important, sure, but not like the end of the world. So CDs and consistent damage kind of go hand in hand. But talking about the damage, it's based on a cycle. It doesn't have a burst window. It's not about bursty. That goes along with the consistent GCDs and all that stuff. So they all kind of intertwine, as I said. So the last thing is community. I found it amusing that the community, there are some people that complain about some of these attributes, like, oh, this sucks, oh, this sucks, oh, this sucks. Why not just play this other spec? It's easier. The difference in Final Fantasy is Black Mage is rewarded if you go above and beyond and master the spec and pull it off. You're rewarded by being the top DPS caster. So I think that's the difference in the culture. But there are definitely still complaints, and they share that Voidform Shadow Priest and Black Mage share that attribute. There are haters of the spec. Nice fire 4.
It is true that all we hold dear is fated to fade away.
Fated to fade away. Alright, anyway, major differences. Let's get into it. So obviously this is not a clone of what I'm losing with Voidform Shadow Priest. So what are the differences between the specs? Let's highlight those so we can talk about them. Mostly so that you, in case you're interested in the spec, so you understand what's different. So what is different? Fire and frost spells. So I talked about they share void spells, but Shadow definitely does not have a frost and fire theme going on. And there's one less dot, one less. So instead of 2 dots, there's 1. The rotation, Shadow Priest was more a simple rotation with speed, creeping haste, but it was simple of a rotation. Cast something, Void Bolt, cast something, Void Bolt, and it was relatively simple of a rotation. Black Mage, on the other hand, has a little bit more going on. However, I'm going to show you a little bit the concepts of it. It was very daunting at first, but I don't think it's going to be an issue. I think it's more of like so much bark to scare you than what's really going on. Let's talk about keybinds. So there's more spells, core spells, and therefore that's why the rotation is a little bit more involved. However, the keybinds didn't become an issue, and I thought it might, looking at rotations ahead of time before I decided to main it. The keybinds turned out fine, and I think looking at it, the reason why is a few things. I have a fancy bar system to work around some issues, and I'll share that in another video. But there's less utility. Like, you don't have like a Master Spell and a heal and other utility spells, or even an interrupt. So there's no utility spells sucking up keybinds, so therefore you can have more spells to do your really big dick rotation with. So the keybinds are pretty much almost similar. In my particular case, I didn't run out of keybinds. It ended up being, I think, 2 less because of my fancy bars that I did. Anyway, so keybinds are going to be more filled with core spells as opposed to utilities. So if you clicked your utilities and didn't use them, you might find it like such a big difference. But if you keybound all of that stuff, then it's going to be like a wash. Pacing. So Black Mage is slower in comparison to like Legion Shadow Priest or 8.2 or 8.3 Shadow Priest, but so is everything else. Like, now that is wiped from the face of the earth, it's not even worth... I had to say it's a difference, but the Black Mage is more comparable to the post-rework Shadow Priest in that regard. Because Voidform is gone, and we're comparing it to that anyway, there's less adrenaline. So there is no creeping haste, unfortunately, with Black Mage, or any other spec that I could find. If there was, I'd be playing it. Unfortunately, it's wiped from the face of the earth. Okay, moving on, we're gonna forget that, because it was why I got so upset it got removed. Effects. So one of the big differences between Black Mage and really almost anything in WoW is the spell animations are ridiculous. They're like just amazing, and the sound effects are really cool too. So there's a lot of things that you don't think about until you play. Like, I didn't play Final Fantasy for graphics or spell effects or sounds or anything, or it being more modern. I went there for my own reasons, and I'm rambling. But it is a difference. When you cast a spell, it feels good, not just for the resource system that is a big reasons, but also the spell animations do add to it, for sure, and so do the spell effects. Fire 4 is fucking awesome. And I don't even like fire spells, but they made me like a fire spell. It's fucking awesome. Alright, anyway. Community. So the community differences is a Black Mage is actually respected overall. Like, even though there's some haters that say, why is this hard, I don't want to deal with it. Generally speaking, the community respects Black Mage, and they're gonna play around you. I was in a dungeon I was in like a random dungeon, like getting gear, and I popped, my ley line cooldown where I can't move. Ideally, I don't want to move. And a mechanic came out on the healer, and it's a stack mechanic. Everybody in the group has to stack or they're gonna die. The healer brings the stack point over to me, and the whole group just instantly came to my location and stacked on me. They didn't expect the Black Mage to move. And I'm just like, oh my god, that's fucking awesome. I'm used to like, shut up and move, bitch. Do mechanics. And listen, you're gonna do mechanics as a Black Mage, but it just shows if it's possible for the group to allow the Black Mage to get by, the community just understands, Black Mage and respects it. A dev advocate. So Yoshi P is a director and producer of Final Fantasy, and he plays Black Mage at a very high level. He has some hardcore kills on his Black Mage. I can see his character is actually on Final Fantasy Logs, which is the same as WarcraftLogs.com. He purple parsed the few that I looked at. The dude is a hardcore player. Again, he's a director and producer. He's playing Black Mage. The spec that I just described to you is played by him. So, dude, that's like fucking cool as fuck, dude. Alright, well, that's all I'm gonna say about that. Obviously, he's gonna understand the spec, right? Alright, Black Mage resource system compared to Voidform. Let's go, real time. We're gonna have conserve phase. We're gonna have Voidform phase. We're gonna have builders. Okay, we're gonna have a builder. We're gonna have a burn. We're gonna have a spender. Alright, I got all that out. So conserve, burn, builder, spender, and a Voidform. That's a triple resource system. We're gonna add in a despair there that's gonna dump mana, but we're not gonna focus on that. So let's go through. Alright, we're back in blue again. Conserve, throw up our dot. That's the best time to put our dot up. You can do it anytime. Alright, what's next? Real time shit going on here. Here's a comparison of all the spells in WoW that do the same damn shit. So it's Voidform, Shadow Priest, and Arcane Mage. And our Vamp Touch Dot, our Void Bolt, our Void Eruption. They all do the same stuff. So if you've played both specs, it's the same thing. So we have a burn, we have a conserve, we have a build, we have a spend. Alright, enough with that. Let's get into Black Mage stuff again. So burn and conserve is going to focus on this area here of the gauge with that timer. And it's going to feed the Voidform part of the gauge and build these little crystals. And fuck, you know, get rid of Void Bolt. What this is here, high movement, we're gonna have a Xenoglossy spell instead, and we gotta make sure we spend those before we cap. So, alright, there you go. There's everything in 100 seconds. I got this. Alright, so that was really fast, right? I got it. So I drew some concept art. I drew some concept art here. It shows you have these 30-second Voidform windows where at the end of 30 seconds, you get a crystal. And if you drop it and you scuff it, you get nothing. So that's where like that whole Voidform like punishment comes in. It talks about like the burn and conserve, like that's the mana snaking up the ramp here. And anytime you scuff that, you're gonna start over. So these things are intertwined with each other. So if you cast the wrong spell, you don't get a void crystal. You have to restart your void form over again and your void eruption and all that, and start back at the beginning of the line. But enough of this. I know this picture's ugly. Let's move along. You can pause it and look at it. It's awful. All right, don't laugh at it. Don't laugh at it, okay? Alright, so that's going to be it for now. The summary of this is the resource system of Black Mage, the way that Black Mage is going to play out in practice. It feels good. It feels like Voidform Shadow Priest. It feels good if you liked that spec design. If you didn't like that spec design, then you're not watching the video at this point, other than to hate me, which in that case, I guess you'd just hate me in the first 5 seconds of the video. But if you liked that stuff, this video is for you, because I'm really excited about this. I'm excited that, I found it interesting that I've known some other people that were big Voidform fans that also liked Arcane Mage, and I actually like Arcane Mage. It was the only ult that I kind of really, put some gear into in BFA, besides another Shadow Priest. But I could never main it because it's a meme, right? Arcane by itself is just kind of like lame. So this is like the good stuff from Arcane, the concept from that, the good stuff from Voidform, and smashed together into the spec that it's the next best thing. It's the next best thing to Voidform now that they wiped it from the face of the earth. The one downside, I do wish, I am going to miss the ramping haste, the creeping adrenaline, but there isn't an alternative for that, unfortunately. I viewed I felt that, for me anyway, and I liked Voidform a 10 out of 10. Black Mage I would rate as an 8, and anything else that's available to play that I have tested, and I've tested a lot of things, and WoW, is like a 2 or a 3. So that's why I changed games, unfortunately. Wasn't easy. And we're not going to talk about Final Fantasy vs. WoW. We're just focused on spec today. What I'm excited about was Black Mage, and it was enough. These reasons was why I'm now going to be main Black Mage as opposed to anything else in WoW. So I hope this was helpful to you. The channel's going to go in this direction going forward. I'm always going to have a comparison and a look at things with the lens of a Voidform, ex-Voidform lover. So if you want to stay subbed. If you really just want to see Shadowland, Shadow Priest only content, I'm sorry, it's just not going to be on my channel for the foreseeable future. So good luck to you all, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Later.
Your minds remain closed. Come, mortals, glimpse the infinite truths. Gaze deep into shadow. Stare into the void. Here, every vision shall be